an outlet for our produce. When we came on board, we discovered that some of our assets were going to waste. Again, we invested in revamping our feed mill based in Abeokuta here. Again, some of our fish farms that were no longer producing, we revamped them, 3 of those. And then we established 3 new plantations for those crops we believe strongly in. We established a 50-hectare plantation, 8. Again, like I said, like an all-time, but we do know that given the scarcity, because we're aware that companies like Unilever earlier on in the year had to bring in oil palm just to meet their production levels. Finally, with respect to crops that we can export, we're calling for investment in rubber plantations, in the establishment of rubber plantations, and we have identified 2 different local governments where this can thrive because we have existing plantations in those areas. Those are Kenya and Ogun waterside. Again, to guarantee returns, we believe that we can make land available to our investors, we can make seedlings available, and we can also mobilize farmers. The next category we're looking at will be those crops that can support already existing companies for their much needed raw material support. I was very happy when the MD of Nestle spoke earlier and also spoke to how they have to source for maize all the way up to the north. We are calling on you to look at the option of backward integration and invest in this sector. May I have that slide on maize, please? Thank you. Maize, as about a month ago, was trading at about 66,000 naira per ton. Right now, it has hit 80,000 naira, and that tells you how much it is needed, and that's a function of the gap in supply. We're asking for the assessment of commoditized maize farms from investors. We have the land for it. It grows practically anywhere in the state. And again, like I have said severally, we have farmers that we can support you with. That also goes for cassava. Currently, Ogun State has the highest concentration of cassava processing factories, starch, ethanol, high-quality cassava flour. But most of these companies are operating below optimal levels, 60% at best. We not only will supply the seedlings, which are of the improved variety, but we'll also ensure that the varieties that we make available target each particular industry. Cassava is red. Okay. Okay. Cassava has been stable at 12,000 naira for the past few months. We're also looking at food security. I said it, I'm sure you watched the video presentation, that we need to ensure that we actually provide enough for ourselves to eat. With respect to food security, we're looking to people who invest in rice. Honorable Minister for Finance, we can eat rice every day, strictly because we can also grow rice locally. So we're calling for investments in that particular crop, as well as greenhouses, to ensure that we can actually provide vegetables all year round. I will speak to the issue of food safety as well, that we can have investment in that sector. We can do abattoir developments. We have locations currently for investors who are interested. What we're saying is we must process our food in a way that meets international standards. We're also calling for investment from those who want to provide. We just said it, we're the biggest poultry producing state, and therefore we must have the much needed backup support for that. And therefore we're asking, the state government already has a 30,000 naira per month hatchery, but we're saying that we want to increase this number to like 1 million naira. Finally, the way our meat is transported, we're also asking that we invest heavily in that regard, with the provision of refrigerated meat vans. We have identified these particular areas not because they're the only things the state is prolific for, but essentially because we believe we need to actually hone in and identify those areas where we think people can actually make maximum returns from. What are our strengths as a state? We have highly qualified and experienced extension services agents. We have availability of arable land. We have an enabling legal environment. We have discounted land clearing charges. We have investments. We can guarantee investment security. And also we provide interface support with our local communities. In conclusion, our doors are still open to our investors. We ask you to invest in land clearing and land preparation equipment. We ask you to invest in large-scale commercial farming, cocoa, rubber, cassava, rice, and maize. We're calling on interested investors for abattoir development and meat transportation. For hatchery investors, we're calling on them as well. Before I wrap up, let me just say this. We are actually privileged to have in our midst this afternoon one of the key enablers of everything that we do for our industry. I am hoping that he will speak to how he can support us to achieve all that we have set our minds to achieve. Ladies and gentlemen, I speak of no other person than the Honorable Minister for Water Resources. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Commissioner for Agriculture, Mrs. Ronke Shekef. I'll quickly go to the second session where we're going to call on the lead discussant, Engineer Suleiman Adamu. He is the Honorable Minister of Water Resources, Federal Republic of Nigeria, hardworking, meticulous gentleman who obtained the Bachelor of Engineering degree in Civil Engineering from Ahmadu Bello University, Zaria, Nigeria. And also on the panel, His Excellency Sean Hoy, Ambassador, Republic of Ireland. You're welcome. And Mr. Kola Masha, I'm just going to call you to come on as well. Mr. Kola Masha is the Managing Director, Dorio Partners. And the moderator for this session, representing the Country Director of GIZ, is Jacques Sam. Jacques Sam is the head of Unit Enabling Environment Reforms. Hi, Jacques. Bonjour.
Okay. Thank you very much. Congratulations, Mr. Governor, Excellency, for organizing such a forum that allows different stakeholders to meet, but at the same time do the right exchanges so that we can find new ideas, innovative ideas for the way forward. We have already talked in the first session about economic growth and integrated agriculture, so somehow there's no need to go into more detail about the different aspects, but more to go directly to the introducers to the comment which was made, especially the Ministry of Agriculture, Commission of Agriculture, which have much appreciated the presentation, especially that we're looking at agriculture as a matter of diversification of the economy. And you have presented the sectors or value chains, product which you want to go into with the opportunities which are there. The Ministry of Finance in her previous presentation said there are 3 C's. We are looking at consumer. It would be very much interesting on your side to see the manner that the market itself can absorb the expansion for the agricultural product domestically, and I think there's also the very big important role of Nigeria in the region, part of the ECOWAS, the market with Benin, Cameroon, Niger, Burkina Faso, Togo, and name it forward. Thank you. Yes. Thank you. Yes, could you share with us your own ideas of the market development that could take place for the increased productivity that could take place in Ogun State? Thank you.
That's why I did a segmentation of the presentation. Again, like I said earlier, it's in 4 broad categories. Some of these will be strictly or mostly for export purposes to earn the much needed foreign exchange. Some of these will feed the existing industries that are producing at below optimal levels. Some of these would also feed us locally to ensure that we have enough food to feed ourselves with. And then some would just ensure that we're not only producing, but that they're in the best conditions available. It's not just production that we're looking at, though. We're also talking packaging, we're talking marketing of these various things. And that's why the focus was high level. The drill down is meant to attract those that have listened to this or are watching this, to attract them to come in and say, this is the particular aspect of it that I am actually interested in.
Okay. You mentioned, just one like question, that there are some funds which are coming from the public sector. We had the First Bank, which is looking at small scale. How do you perceive the role of a financial institution in the whole process of expanding the sector?
The likes of the International Fund for Agric Development actually do target the smallholder farmers, whom over time we have decided we do not want to become extinct. And that's the target of their fund specifically. With respect to funding the sector generally, it's unfortunate, but what we have are facilities made available at double digits. And I'm sure you've heard the Honorable Minister for Agriculture speak severally to it, that we must get funds at below those levels. The best you have locally is the CBN facilitated funding, which is currently at 9% because it's routed through commercial banks. It's only where you build a good relationship with a bank that you actually can get a reduction by like a percentage or 2. That cannot sustain the industry. It is therefore important for us. As a nation, as a state, we must find the right sources of funds for these various projects and more.
Thank you very much. Minister Adamu of Water Resources, you have some ideas that to sustain, the position in terms of agricultural expansion and how water resources can be accompanying the whole process of development of the sector.
Thank you very much. Well, first of all, I think it's all clear to everybody that what we do is just in the Ministry of Water Resources is basically to provide the necessary infrastructure to support the agricultural program. We're very much keyed into that. We're probably aware that the Federal Ministry of Water has 12 river basins, one of which is the Ogun Ocean River Basin Development Authority. Unfortunately, most of the land that we have developed, out of the 8,500 hectares planned for development, only 10% has been developed in the entire river basin. There's a potential for about 1,700 hectares in Ogun State alone, but the total area that has been developed so far is really nothing to write home about. We've also suffered the problem of the encroachment by developers. I think one of the largest schemes that is in Ogun State has been taken over by developers. That notwithstanding, I think there are huge potentials. What we are trying to do at the Federal Ministry is to revive the river basins, to look at all those schemes, at least to take all our river basins to the planned level, what was originally planned. We would like to see that in the next 10, 15 years, we're able to take them. In the next 4 years, we're able to take most of the river basins to develop up to a planned area. So we have a plan to develop another 100,000 hectares of irrigation. Nigeria has about 3.1 million hectares of irrigable land, out of which 1.8 million is within the Niger Benue Valley. But then virtually in every state we have potentials for irrigation. And so in the context of Ogun State, what we can do is to try to expand the existing infrastructure that we have. But unfortunately, we can't take it beyond 1,700 hectares. But I also consider that there's huge potential here. The land is quite arable. I took note of the fact that you have 1.2 million hectares, which there's potential for irrigation. I'm sure. I don't know. I'm not familiar with your territory, but I'm sure there's a huge potential. I've seen you mention the Fadama program. So we can support by introducing technology, cheaper technology now, because I think it's becoming too difficult to start constructing large irrigation systems like we used to do in the past when we had resources. Another area we can support is we have some dams here, and I've seen already we're doing some aquaculture. Ogun Dam, which is just around the corner, there's a successful program going on there, and we are encouraging that because many of the dams we have, over 200 dams in Nigeria, a lot of them are not being put to use properly because the irrigation infrastructure has not been completed or not done at all. So we are saying in the interim that people should, we will encourage entrepreneurs to come and invest we can lease out the dams for them to do aquaculture in the same way that has been successfully done here in Ogun State. So these are just a few things that I'd like to share with you at this point. But let me seize this opportunity to say that although we are talking about agriculture, we're also talking about investment or boosting the economy. And I have not had any mention of water supply infrastructure. And I don't think we're doing well across the country in that respect. And there's huge potential for even water entrepreneurship. We can have young graduates to manage water schemes and sanitation facilities. And I think this is one area you should look at. In a few weeks, we're bringing out a national program on water and sanitation. And I'm very glad to see that there are some key industrialists and bankers here, and we're going to come and knock on their doorsteps because we feel that just from budgetary allocation alone for states and the federal government and the local governments will not be enough to make us achieve the target set by the Sustainable Development Goals. We need to get everybody all embracing. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your introduction, enlightening us about what has been going on, the different challenges in the sector. I would like, if it's okay, to have Mr. Ambassador of Ireland to talk about linkages between the water resource management and the expansion of the agricultural sectors. What can you share in terms of the manner that this has been accomplished in your own country that can be shared in terms of practices that can be transferred here in Nigeria, and specifically in Ogun State? Thank you.
Thank you very much, and I'd like to acknowledge the Honourable Governor, Ministers, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. What I'd like to talk about just for a few moments are some of the learning and some of the lessons that we have from our own agricultural experience in Ireland that brought us from 50 years ago, a land of subsistence farmers where we were exporting our cattle live to Great Britain, and all the added value from those animals was being turned into profit by processors in Britain, leaving very poor returns to our farmers, to a situation where today we produce 10 times more than we consume, and we're a net exporter of agricultural goods. I believe, first of all, it's very important to say that Nigeria is a blessed country. In terms of your agriculture, you have the land, you have the natural sunshine, and you have the rains, which we saw today. and I believe, possibly with the exception of some know-how, all the answers for Nigeria's agricultural potential are here within your country. You have all the natural resources and you have the people. And I believe it's important to start with that. The technology about growing crops, that is not the difficult part, because I think that expertise is available. It is getting the food sector right, and as we heard from the previous panel, getting the value chain in place, connecting all the different producers and processors with the consumers, so that at all levels you have the quality that you deserve. When I first came to Nigeria on my first visit in 2012, accompanying our minister, I remember that the governor of Lagos, Babatunde Fashola, said at the time that 5,000 cattle are killed each day in Lagos, and every one of them is consumed on the day. There is no processing. And there is a market opportunity straight away. There are many quick wins. Most of the processed meat in Nigeria is imported, but there are huge potentials. The post-harvest losses, why, and I hear this in different parts of the country, 40 to 60% of what is harvested is never consumed because it is lost before that can happen. Again, we have the answers for those. But I think in terms of attracting investors, one huge asset you have here in Nigeria is that the local market can consume everything you produce. And I know that the Commissioner talked about the need to export to earn foreign exchange. But if I was an investor, I would certainly be very attracted by the fact that the market is already here. You do not have to go and look for the market. I think it's also important that we, and I believe the Commissioner already made this point, food safety. Food safety for Nigerian people should be the same as food safety for export. And this is not a negotiable point. Maybe just a few other points on Ireland. We have a partnership in place where the private sector and the government work together on our Food Harvest 2020. The national goals are set by a committee that involves the farmers' representatives, the private sector, and is chaired by our Minister of Agriculture. All of our national goals are set in consultation with all the stakeholders, and in that way we find that they are always realistic. We need to find a way to move smallholders into outgrowers, and I think this is something that Ogun State in particular has the advantage, because you have the proximity to one of the biggest markets anywhere in the world, and certainly the biggest market in Africa. But we also need to move away from what I would call vanity projects. All over Nigeria there are projects that were set up that were not based on reality. Air-conditioned houses for cattle to produce dairy products. We can do this. In Ireland we can produce wine, but it would be so ridiculously uneconomic that we're never going to do that. And I think each country and each state must look at its comparative advantage. If you want to go into highly sophisticated dairy production, realise who your market is. It is not the mass market of the country. It is only for those who can afford it in the city. You need to look at how you can scale up to produce food for the population. And maybe the last point is the need to attract young people into agriculture. I believe that Nigeria still needs more champions for agriculture, still needs people that can stand up and say that agriculture is an attractive industry. In the last decade in Ireland, we had an economic crash, and one thing that we are determined to do is to share with everybody the experience of that crash so that nobody needs to go through those hardships. But one thing we discovered when our economy was growing too fast was that people were moving off the land. Everybody wanted to live in the cities. Everybody wanted to have new technology, Wi-Fi. What we have found since the crash in 2008 is that all of our agricultural schools are oversubscribed. In some schools, the exam results you need to get into agriculture are just as high as those that you need to get into medicine. people realise that agriculture is a business. It is a good business and it is a very good lifestyle. Living in rural areas away from the pollution of the cities is what the future is going to be. In Nigeria, you're going to be the third largest population in 50 years' time. You need agriculture to start. There is an old saying in East Africa that the best time to plant a tree is 20 years ago. The second best time is now. Thank you.
Some addition and complementary, please, Mr. Madam.
Good afternoon. Once again, start by thanking His Excellency for putting on this wonderful event and focusing on some of the critical areas that we believe will be pivotal to moving the country forward. First off, before I build on my fellow panelists' comments, first I'll share just a little background on the work that we're doing in the agriculture sector. So fundamentally, we're working to ensure that smallholder farmers in Nigeria are able to reach their full potential. Today, we run an organization called Babangona that supports 12,000 farmers in northern Nigeria to increase their incomes typically about 3.5 times above the national average. This is accomplished by enabling them to have access to the right knowledge, most importantly, credit, the inputs, and the markets that enable them to optimize their land. Our vision is to reach 1 million farmers by 2025, enabling a total of about 5 million people be lifted out of poverty. We're not doing this alone. We have an amazing group of partners. We're very fortunate to have His Highness the Sarkin of Kanu as our chairman, and working very aggressively to scale up this model. Now, speaking specifically to the agricultural potential here in Nigeria, why we might not have reached it, and what needs to happen to fully unlock that potential. Well, first and foremost, as an investor forum, let me be very clear. I fundamentally believe that Nigeria will be the next Brazil. If you look at the key things that you need to create a dominant agricultural powerhouse, those are land, water, and labor. And if you look at what sets the largest players globally apart, it is a fourth critical piece, which is a large internal market. So let's look at Nigeria. We have about 84 million hectares of arable land. In terms of water, we have 3 of the 8 major river systems in Africa. We haven't even touched the surface of our irrigation potential, with over 279 billion cubic meters of underground water reserves. In terms of labor, in the next few years, we'll have 120 million people active in the labor force. And finally, if you look at what sets countries like Brazil and other major agriculture players apart, is that they have a very large internal market that enables them to develop the economies of scale critical to become a dominant force in agricultural exports. Now, if we look at Nigeria and what really is hindering our potential, really it comes down to one key thing, and that is low levels of farm productivity. It makes it very difficult for us to compete. If you look across the board in pretty much almost every commodity, our levels of farm level productivity struggle. Maize, average yields of 1.5 tons per hectare, compared to the rest of the world where they're able to get 3, 4, 5 tons, in some parts of the world upwards of 10 to 12 tons per hectare. If you look at some of the challenges we face in the poultry sector, we have very high levels of mortality and very low levels of feed conversion ratio, very high levels of feed conversion ratio. So I think the reality is often, as a country, we tend to focus not on the fundamental underlying structural challenges that are inhibiting our ability to improve that low level of farm productivity. And as investors and as government, if we focus our efforts into trying to address some of these underlying structural issues, it'll be very critical. And really that comes down to really focusing on 4 key things. The first is ensuring that farmers have access to the right knowledge that they need to improve their productivity. 2 is ensuring that they have access to the capital they need, because most people do not fully understand how working capital intensive agriculture is. To farm 1 hectare of maize in Nigeria, you need about $500 worth of working capital. And the reality as a country, when we think about solving this working capital challenge, we think way too small. The reality is, if you want to finance the working capital requirements of the top 10, just the top 10 commodities in Nigeria, the working capital requirements are around $20 billion. And so we have to start thinking about ways in which we are able to unlock sustainably, cost-effective, commercial levels of capital that are able to meet the needs of smallholder farmers, and not solely think about how we can survive on subsidized capital, which reality will never enable us to reach the quantum of capital that we require. The third is access to quality, cost-effective inputs. The reality is, if you look at the inefficiencies in the Nigerian supply chain for inputs, it makes inputs get to farmers at ridiculously high prices that makes that purchase and that investment not a viable investment. It's about looking critically at the entire supply chain for critical implements such as fertilizer, vaccines, so on and so forth, and eliminating unnecessary transaction costs to make it a viable investment. And then finally, the reality is Nigeria, we have a lot of small farmers. For businesses and processors to procure from many of those small farmers, it has a very high transaction cost. So government playing a role to help to facilitate the ability to efficiently and effectively aggregate demand and aggregate supply to minimize those transaction costs, to enable the system to work effectively. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Like you said, knowledge, capital, and the input. Time is of essence, unfortunately, and I wish there would be more time because it's a very interesting subject. Water resources, agricultural development, diversification of the economy, I really appreciate. So, in a very, very brief manner, I would ask, starting from you, Ambassador, in just 1 minute to come up to a conclusion from this discussion. Please. And we follow up with the Minister, Commissioner, just 1 minute. 1 minute, yes. Yeah. Just